Good morning as well to Theo Usherwood. Theo, very good morning to you.
Happy New Year, Mike.
Happy New Year.
You again.
Thank you so much for joining us. I know it's a busy time, it's family time, it's, but sometimes you just need to get away. That's what I decided. I was like, I've had enough of that. I'm going to come back and do some work for a while.
I had an editor who always used to work on Boxing Day. He didn't have to do it when I started out. And the only reason is he wanted to get away from his in-laws. He couldn't stand it. So as soon as he had the opportunity, he was straight back to the office.
Yes. Fortunately, I've managed to sort of refine my socialising with members of my family so that it doesn't really involve any in-laws at all, which is really, really good.
Yeah,
let's talk, though, about how bad things are for Labour, because this poll at the weekend in the Sunday Times, quite extraordinary stuff, really. I mean, we knew they were pretty unpopular. We knew that his approval rating, Keir Starmer's approval rating, was down through the floor. But, I mean, this is really quite serious, isn't it, to suggest that if there was an election tomorrow, which is, 6 months after they won a landslide victory, they'd lose nearly 200 seats.
Yes, and this is a significant poll, and it will cause a huge amount of agitation, I'd imagine, amongst Labour MPs who don't want to, when they signed up to become an MP, didn't sign up to become an MP for 5 years. And I imagine that if this trend continues, they will be starting to ask questions about Keir Starmer's leadership. Now, the mechanism to get rid of a Labour leader is much more difficult than it is to get rid of a Conservative leader. But the point remains, Mike, that this trend needs to be stopped. It needs to be stopped quickly from Labour's point of view, and it needs to be stopped for the local elections in May. If there's a glimmer of hope for Labour, and it is this, if you look at this poll, if you add together the number of Labour MPs, you add together the number of SNP and the Liberal Democrats, then that is enough to form what would be called a rainbow coalition, and keep Labour, and as Labour being the largest party, they would remain, Keir Starmer or another would remain as Prime Minister, but that is all predicated on the fact that Reform and the Conservatives can't find a way around their current impasse when it comes to doing a deal. Now, if they can get their act together and do a deal, then at some point over the next 4 years, then it would look, and the current trends continue, then it would look to be curtain for this Labour government.
Yeah, but that is the problem, isn't it? Because you've got ever more kind of unpopularity coming their way, and with every move that they seem to make, they become even more unpopular. It's not as if there's any kind of change in the temperature. I mean, I was driving around the M25 yesterday, taking my daughter to Gatwick Airport, and you've passed quite a lot of overhead bridges, farm vehicles parked on them saying, don't bite the hand that feeds you. There's a lot of, what you might call base level, kind of street level anger out there, and that's just from the farmers. We also know clearly that we're going to have a big schools backlash coming up because this ridiculous notion of getting 6,500 teachers out of the VAT raid, which is going to cause massive problems in the state school sector because of overcrowding and all of that. It's just not going to get any better, is it? We've got NHS strikes, I think, coming over the course of the new year. We've got rail strikes coming up starting tomorrow, running all the way through to May. I mean, there's nothing good on the horizon, is there?
No, I think you're quite right to point that out. And the other thing I'd say, Mike, is that, and I know there's a huge amount, I'm sure you've been following the news like I have over the Christmas break, but there's been a huge amount said about the fact that, there's this row between Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage, and the Reform membership now surging past 150,000, and Kemi Badenoch accusing the Reform ticker membership being a fake. But the truth is this: where Reform is gaining, it is predominantly in Labour seats. They came out of 98 seats where they came second in the general election. In 89 of those, they were Labour seats. So actually, when you look at Nigel Farage's surge that we've seen in terms of membership, in terms of his popularity, Reform now has a better net favourability rating than Labour. Nigel Farage now has a better net favourability rating than Keir Starmer. It is Reform's surge at the same time as all of those problems that you've just listed, which is going to continue in its current path, and there is nothing that Labour seems to be able to do to stop that decline. So actually, it is the surge of Reform UK and Nigel Farage that is going to sting Labour. It's going to hurt Labour the most, and it doesn't seem. And as you say, there's no apparent hope. There's no salvation looking into 2025, and of course events can take over. But there is no salvation at the moment for Keir Starmer in anything that he might be announcing or might happen that will arrest that decline in his popularity.
Right. And what about the May elections? Because there was talk, wasn't there, just before Christmas of, you know, a kind of a realignment of local sort of areas and you know, making sure that district councils were done away with and you know, sort of regions were somehow put together, which might prevent some elections from taking place. Has that now been forgotten about, or is that still happening?
Well, it could still happen. I mean, it's got to be ironed out. But Labour would be incredibly stupid to do anything that would feed into this narrative that they're trying to stitch it up to protect themselves.
Yes.
I mean, because ultimately there's going to have to be an election at some local election at some point. And yes, they want to streamline councils, but to go ahead in May in order to avoid what will be a very painful moment, Reform projected to win around 400 seats in those local elections as things currently stand. To try and gerrymander it or change the rules or defer those votes as part of a widespread reform of local government, when actually the accusation will come back pretty quickly and will like a boomerang and hit Keir Starmer in the face, because it will be, well, you're just changing the rules because you're scared of us, and ultimately there's going to have to be a vote at some point. And I would think that any pain that they might experience in May if they tried to delay it would be much more painful further down the line.
Right. And what do you make of this Kemi Badenoch, Nigel Farage feud? Because it seems to me most people looking at it say it wasn't really necessary. Kemi Badenoch didn't need to do it. She didn't need to raise the problem. She didn't need to raise the issue that many, many more people who used to vote Conservative are now going to vote Reform. You know, why did she do it? It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense. And, you know, when you speak to Reform people, and I've spoken to a few over Christmas, when you speak to Reform people, they're like, thank you, Kemi Badenoch. Yeah. You've done us a huge favour. This story was going away. Yes, we'd had our surge in numbers. Yes, we'd overtaken you. And just with your tweet on Boxing Day, you just gave us another week of coverage. Thank you so much. And when you speak to Conservatives, they're like, what were you doing? Yeah. What on earth were you thinking? Because if you're going to do, let's say for the sake of argument, like there is some merit, and actually the independent analysis is that there isn't any merit to causing this live ticker a fake, as Kemi Badenoch has done. If you're going to do that, get one of your outriders, get somebody to start asking a few journalists who are sympathetic to your cause to ask questions. Don't go on X on Boxing Day and start tweeting. Right. I mean, that was just like, it made absolutely no sense. No. And it was, of course, particularly exactly on a day when Nigel Farage wanted. And not only that, but on a day when there's not very much news around. So, I mean, even if you're going to do it on a day when, you know, it's not going to make front page news. And you just go, who's advising her? You know, I've already seen a couple of tweets saying, you know, in the new year, Reform are going to make the offer to Kemi Badenoch to become their full-time marketing manager because she's done such a great job over the Christmas holidays, you know. Well, it's funny you said it. It was a wise owl pointed out to me, who knows about these things. Interestingly, this was something that was done on Kemi Badenoch's Twitter of X on Boxing Day without the supervision of those around her. Right. And actually she just decided to, you know, the accusation, you know, she did just go for it without actually taking the advice. She's got, to be fair to her, she's got a couple of clever people working for her who know what they're doing. They've been around in Westminster for quite a long period of time. And I struggle to see any way in which they would have advised her to go down this particular route. They would know it's madness, and it turned out to be.
Right. And in another sort of blow to Starmer, there's a piece on the front page of the I newspaper this morning from Survation, another poll which is conducted for 38 Degrees, basically saying 62% of people think the government will not tackle the cost of living in 2025. Nearly two-thirds of voters basically don't believe a word he says, and that's a problem.
Yeah, and the cost of living is the most important one. Of everything that Keir Starmer wants to do over the next 3.5, 4 years in order to prepare for the next election, the most important one for him is that people feel better off as a result of having voted Labour in July. And if people don't believe in the first instance that they are going to be better off, then when you actually tell them that they're going to be better off, or they should be better off, well, you say, "Oh, look at this set of numbers that's just come out."
What he keeps saying, though.
They say you're better off, but they're not going to believe you, and that's the real problem. And the other thing is that you keep on breaking your promises. You build up this sense that you can't be trusted. So if you go and stand next to waspy women and say, "We back your campaign," and it turns out that you have the opportunity to stump up the cash, which would prove that to be true, and you don't, then people are going to stop believing you. If you say there will be no tax rises, and you go and put up taxes by £40 billion, including £25 billion of national insurance, and removing the exemptions for farmers, then people are not going to believe you. Trust in politics is hard-earned and easily lost.
It really is. And the problem is he keeps repeating it. Whenever he is in front of a camera, he talks about, well, we had to make the tough choices because we had to, bring back prosperity to people and make them feel better off. Well, nobody feels better off. We had to cut back on the waiting lists, Well, the waiting lists are getting longer. Nothing's actually working. So you can't just keep standing there telling us that it's all rosy in the garden when the garden's basically burning down.
Yeah, and the problem they've got is that there is no way to arrest the decline. And the other thing, just on the terms of, the public services, if we see further strike action, and there is every likelihood that we will see further strike action this year coming, 2025, the public are going to be furious. They're going to be so angry because we had £10 billion of public sector pay rises that might actually go up back in the summer. We're now having to pay for that, of course, with higher taxes. And if the trade unions then turn around and start strike action, which means that actually the trains still don't run on time, you still have to wait.
Well, you don't have to wait long. You don't have to wait till next year, Theo, because tomorrow, starting on New Year's Eve, Avanti, the RMT in Avanti are going on strike. So if you're going to try and travel on what is one of the busiest days of the year to travel up on the West Coast main line, you're going to struggle. And they're going to also apparently strike several days over Christmas. I think they're striking on the 2nd of January, the 3rd of January. They're talking about striking all the way through the summer till May, and through the spring rather, every single Sunday.
Yes, and the problem for Keir Starmer's got, and when he decided to get rid of Louise Hay, the Transport Secretary, was she was very sympathetic to the union's cause. If the tactic was just to hand out more money to the trade unions, namely the ASLEF and the RMT, to stop the strike action, they decided they ended that strategy with Louise Hay's resignation and her replacement with Heidi Alexander. So it's clearly, if there's a recognition that actually doling out billions of pounds of taxpayers' cash doesn't stop the strikes, then what is their new strategy to ensure that these strikes don't go ahead? Because ultimately these strikes, when you name those dates, it makes it's really aggravating because it's designed to cause maximum disruption. This country needs to get back on its feet. People need to be able to feel that they can trust the train network, so that they can go to work, so they can take up contracts, so they can. The economy needs to move, and at the moment we had earlier this month we had growth flatlining. It went down from a measly 0.1% to 0.0%. We need to get the country moving again. We can't get the country moving again if many people don't drive, or many people need to travel long distances. They can't get on a train to go and do some work. No, it's absolutely shocking, terrible. It's not going anywhere good. Theo, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed.